Good evening, everybody. I'm Ruth Peterson, and this is Band Talk. And tonight we're going behind the scenes with some of our MPA chairs. We have Jamie Bream from the Southeastern District. We have Tracy Humphries from the South Central District, and we have Audrey Yosai from the East Central District. And they all have various levels of experience doing this. And Jamie brings his high school MPA experience to us, and then Tracy and Audrey bring their middle school experience, but a lot crosses over. And so I hope you take advantage of the information you get tonight. We're not focusing on musical preparation. We're focusing on the things behind the scenes, or the paperwork, or the things to be organized and just help make it easier on you and the MPA chairs. The first thing we wanted to address are the most recent rulings that affect MPA for this year. And let's kick it off with the MPA Rule 3C, which has been suspended for 2024. Jamie, you want to start with that one?
Yeah, so we've suspended the rule again this year, but it's not like carte blanche suspension. Like, there are some guidelines you have to follow. So you can duplicate 5 people or up to 20% of your ensemble. So if you're wanting to add some of your, like if you're a high school director and you want to add some of your wind ensemble people into your concert band, and you have 60 people in your wind ensemble, then you can duplicate 20% of that, which what do we think? 12, I think it's 12. So you can duplicate 12 people and they can play the same instrument. So they can play trumpet in both ensembles. Now you can still duplicate personnel all you want, as long as they're playing different instruments, and that does not apply to either 20% or your 5 number that is.
Awesome. Audrey or Tracy, do you have anything to add to that? Okay. The next one is pretty easy. No electronics will be allowed unless specified by the composer. And then the one for sight reading, this has changed a little bit. Tracy, you want to take that one?
Well, I know everyone's reading one level below this year instead of the 2 or the choice. And I know if you're playing flex selections, as my group will be, it is the same rule. So it's also 1 grade level below.
All right.
And I know that Richard Holmes has been pushing the sight reading information out to the chair. So if you haven't seen that already, it's probably coming out very soon.
So the flex rule, the old version was if you went in flex, you automatically sight read in the lowest grade level possible, and that is not what's happening this year. Just to clarify that, you're going to sight read as if you were not going flex. So making sure you know that. Sight reading for grade 1 is optional, correct? Not required.
Does anybody else have questions about those rulings or anything to add from our panel? All right. So for each of you, what has been the most common mistake directors make when they attend MPA? And whoever wants to go first.
I'll start. I'm probably the newest MPA chair, so a lot of my biggest issues last year just stemmed from people running late and not allowing enough travel time between their schools to the site, or allowing travel time with traffic. And then once they get there, they don't have their paperwork ready to turn in. They don't have their scores organized, and their MENC or NAFME card now ready to show. And just having all the little things that you need to turn in and feel like that you're ready to go before you go into the warm-up room. And then realizing that if you show up late, you go into your warm-up room, and that's the time that you have because you're late.
Good to know.
Yeah, travel time is a big deal. And when you run late, we have to run the schedule. We got to keep on schedule. And so occasionally, like that's happened, and like a band's already been there, like watching bands. And I'm like, hey, can you go in to warm up early and play, 30 than the earlier spot? And usually band directors will do that. But and I like how you said come in with their paperwork not organized. That's a pet peeve for me. Like, is like it's nice to go ahead and make packets for each judge. So like each score for each judge, and then go ahead and clip your like instrumentation and your rep with it. And then that's how you give that to your registration table instead of just handing them a stack of scores and a bunch of different papers and all that.
And I'd say one additional thing we've run into, I remember particularly last year, is we did have one day where we had inclement weather. And that slows the process down, because if people are having to bring instruments in cases, normally we don't allow that. But, if we're having to kind of change things up a little bit, and that's going to add time in, then it's better to arrive earlier. And we've also had some folks get there what normally would have been a good amount of time, but everybody had to go to the bathroom. And so they were spending their warm-up time, rotating in and out of the bathroom. And I was like, well, I can't give you any extra time because, as Jamie said, you got to stay on schedule. So if you got to go to the bathroom, get here earlier.
I will say a mistake that I think a lot of band directors don't understand, or a lot of new directors when they come to MPA, is they don't understand you can't just copy scores and turn in copies of scores to be judged from. Like, you have to have purchased 3 sets of scores for each piece you're playing. And that and so it's not that they just didn't want to purchase them. They're like, well, they were back ordered. Well, there's still a process you have to go through. You have to contact Pepper. Pepper will give you a letter that says you have permission to copy it, and it has to be destroyed because it's not going to be there in time. And you would put that with your copies of your scores.
And I know we try to emphasize that if you're doing e-print, then you need to bring in something that documents that you bought 3 copies of the e-print score as well.
Bring your receipt, attach a receipt, and same thing with your JW Pepper letter. Attach it to each one of the scores. So go ahead and print it 3 times so that each judge has the opportunity to see that your score is legal.
I noticed when I was on Pepper recently that they do have on the e-print, they have a proof of purchase that you click now, which is really nice. Also, in the chat box, I put the first link is the policies and procedures. This is from our Constitution and bylaws, and then our other document, the policies and procedures. There are all the rules, and I don't know how many directors actually know that information is on the website for people to read, so they understand what they have to do. So that first link you may find to be very helpful. And then we represent the different organizations in our state. And if you're interested in those, there are the contacts and more information about each of the organizations. All right. The adjudicator forms are available also on the NCBA website. Do you guys have any advice about how directors can use those with their students, or to better prepare for the actual event?
I'll start. So on the back side of the stage adjudication form, or at the second page, my printer just happened to copy front back, is some really cool keywords and good vocabulary you can use with your students. And it tells you, it kind of breaks down each of the sections and what they're looking for in there. So for tone quality, some of your keywords: tonal concept. That's a fun one to teach to middle schoolers. Embouchure, stick technique, airflow, equipment, resonance. But you can use those words in your classroom and just help your students have a better idea of what the judges are looking for as you go through each of the things, rather than just looking at the front side of the sheet and being like, I don't understand. Okay, tone quality. All right, y'all, we're being graded on tone quality. Here we go.
I
Excellent.
also think the kids having a sheet, or using it and letting them have a copy of it, they can write on it. I tell my kids, it goes in order. Like, obviously, the top of the sheet is tone quality, and that's the most important thing. Because if you don't sound good and you don't sound like what you're supposed to sound like, you're not going to be in tune. And if that's not good, the next thing's not going to be good, and the next thing. And so that's why they're in the order they're in, and that's how we talk about them in class.
Tracy, do you have anything to add about the adjudication sheets?
Well, Jamie read my mind on the tone piece, because I do think sometimes we get bogged down with right notes and rhythms and whatnot, and we forget those very, very important other factors that are listed at the top. But I also think down at the bottom where it says, I forget exactly how it's worded, but general factors or other factors where they're looking at, how you come on the stage and how you present yourself as far as your attire and all of those things. Not necessarily a deal breaker, but I do think that that's something to take into consideration when the kids look like, they're there to do something important, and they're very organized with how they come on the stage and go off of the stage and all of that. Sometimes judges do pay attention to those things, especially on the front end of the process. And sometimes that can be a difference maker when they're really trying to decide between this score and this score, what they're going to put down on that sheet.
It's your first impression, right? Those general factors are the first impression that you make when you walk on the stage. And that first impression can be to the judges, oh, this is going to be great, or right. And if they're already in that stage, like that's already colored how they're going to hear you. You could be the best band in the world, but they've already got that idea of these kids don't care or these kids don't know. So how you come on does make a difference.
Well, and I've been told you can tell what a band's going to sound like before you hear the first note that they play, or you can tell what score they're going to get before they play their first note. Sometimes just hopefully not, but you do make an impression for sure, like you said.
I would always have my kids practice which way they were going to go from their row, from the warm-up room to the stage and then to the sight reading room. And it, especially maybe high school, you don't need to do that, but with middle schoolers, they get antsy about everything, and the anxiety kicks in and the nerves kick in, and I just found it really helps to practice that so they understand which way they're going and what kind of behavior they're displaying when they're going from place to place. And that when they leave the stage, if they're doing sight reading, they still got to stay in with their game face and be ready to go for the next thing. So I think it's a good thing for middle schoolers to practice. Without looking at the musical aspects so much, but could you guys explain the process that people go through when they do the stage adjudication, if we have anybody that listens or watches and hasn't done this before?
I will say, and that's something that you run into a lot with new people too, is that you have to give time between each piece when you're on stage. So after you play your march, you kind of have to turn around and wait on the judges to give you a thumbs up that they're ready for you to go on the next piece. And somebody who's not that you can always tell a band that's nervous and they've never been before. They got off the march, they step off, the kids change pieces, they step up and start going again. And so you got to give the judges time to get caught up and get written and talked about what they need to talk about before you play your next selection.
And I will say too, I know that we focus a lot on the judges, but if we're lucky, there's an audience out there as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I've noticed a lot of younger or newer directors who don't acknowledge the audience. Like, when the piece is over with and the folks in the audience clap, and there's no recognition of that on behalf of the students. Or so, I think that, that does matter, not as far as the adjudication piece, but, just being thankful that, the applause is taking place, or to acknowledge the audience.
Definitely. I think that's important too, whether you've got one school sitting out there or you've got 10 schools sitting out there.
And I don't know if every district does announcing like of your band before you play. But I always think it's really nice that if once the announcers announce your band, if you you acknowledge them or shake their hand as well before you take the stage. Like as a thank you.
That's a nice touch.
Mm-hmm.
And also, if you're getting a recording, you know, not the adjudicators recordings, but just a recording of the kids playing. You know, you want that to start off well and end well. And if somebody's in the front row recording, you want to make sure they're ready to go too. Is there anything else about stage adjudication that we need to cover? Or do any of you have any questions? If we're going to make an interpretive musical choice that is not marked in the score, do you suggest we write it in our scores so the judges see what they hear?
I say no. I would say no. I mean, as somebody who's been going MPA for 20 years, I would, that stuff that it's the stuff like I tell my kids, the right notes and the right rhythms that get you a 2, and the stuff that's not on the page and not written is what bumps you up into 1. And so I think you should just do those things, and that will make the judges, oh, look, I really like that you put that crescendo in there. That really made a difference there. Or I like that you did a fermata there, things like that. I think you should just do them. You don't need to mark them in the score.
Can you think of a time where anything should be marked for the judges?
I think I've occasionally done a part reassignment out of necessity, and I may, I don't always necessarily stick to this 100%, but if it's something that I think needs a little clarification, then I may indicate that to the judge. But I think a lot of times if you're being very musical, like Jamie said, you can do those things without, pointing them out, and maybe you don't pull it off as well as you intend to. Maybe it's good not to draw their attention to it. But I do think that there might be a few specific occasions. Like I said, if I don't have this instrument and there's a solo, then I've, given it to this instrument or something along those lines.
I agree. I think the only thing that I would mark would be perhaps an instrumentation change. If I don't have a tuba, but I have a bass clarinet who's playing the part, or if I don't have a bass clarinet and the tuba's playing a part, just noting real quick or circling the who's got the cue.
Good. This one we might want to go into a little more in depth, especially if you've taken younger groups and haven't done the sight reading. But could you guys take us through the sight reading process?
Sure. When you walk into the sight reading room, this is where you really, really want to train your kids not to talk, because I have gotten the comment and been marked down in my own sight reading when I was a young band director, just because the kids get nervous and they sit there and they chitter chatter while they're waiting on the music to be passed out, or while they're waiting on the judge to finish his instructions. And we got a 2 instead of a 1, and a 2 is fine as long as they earn it and not because of their behavior, right? So this is something I really work and train with my kids, because they are chatty. They're chatty all the time, right? And they don't mean to be disrespectful. They just want to chatter. They don't feel like something important is happening right now, so they're going to have a little sidebar conversation. So you walk into the room, you sit down, you find your seat. The judge will banter. They have a script. Practice with the script. It's right there on the North Carolina Bandmasters website. You can practice with it so that the kids know what that's going to sound like. We practice passing out folders on our pre-MPA event that we have on Thursday. We'll practice sight reading right there on stage in front of their parents, using the script for pre-MPA so that they have to do it under pressure. So they don't talk. Make sure they double check their parts when they pull the song out of the folder, so that if they're a baritone treble clef reader, especially at that middle school level, that they have a baritone treble clef part, that they didn't pull out the bass clef part because they're looking at it like, I don't know what this is, right? So they have to look at those things. Sometimes there's a string bass and the tuba and the bassoon all in the same folder. So you just want to make sure that they have the right part in front of them before they turn it over face down on the music stand. You'll clear the stands and tuck your binders under. That's all in the script, right? So that there's nothing up on your music stand except for the folder with the sight reading in it. I personally like to have my kids take their small instrument off and put it in their lap or on the music stand as well, so that we don't have any of those accidental sounds during our practice process while we're chiseling and going through. the instruments, because if you start playing, you lose your practice time and you go straight into performance. And then use your whole prep time, use all of it. And if you get through the song, go back and check something that wasn't right. And me personally, don't talk. Oh my gosh, don't talk during that time. Like, I don't need to explain the song. The kids need time to practice the song, right? Like, I don't need to explain everything as we go along. So we're going to go straight into practice mode, and we're going to practice for our entire 5 minutes. We go in grade 2 or grade 2 and 3. So we have 5 minutes prep time, and we will practice that whole 5 minutes so that the kids have the most opportunity to be successful. They don't need to hear me talk about the piece. They need to practice the piece. And then at the end, yeah, just wait and let the judge finish up. Jamie.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. As somebody who's been through the process and judged sight reading in most of the districts, I think there's a misconception from directors of like what the judge is looking for in that prep time. And I think they think, oh, if I don't clap or if we don't count, no, you just need to get that piece taught. And if your best method is for your kids to clap and count, then that's fine. But for me, the best method is I get myself like 20 seconds, I flip through real quick, see what I see, and then we're in. There is no look at it with your stand partner, discuss, don't do any of that. That's a waste of a minute and a half of your time. And so you just start tizzling from get-go, and then you fix it as you get through the piece. You know, you don't need to skip ahead or talk or wait. I think that's a lot of young directors that worry that they're getting a lot of judgment on that 5 minute prep time, and that's not what we're doing in that 5 minute prep time. That's for you to get the piece taught, not for them to kind of talk about it. Because honestly, if you're letting 2 middle schoolers talk about what's on the stand for a minute, that's not what they're talking about.
Nope.
Well, and as far as the talking, other than however your plan works, I've always told my kids that they can get disqualified if they talk.
I do too. That's like mine. If you speak, we're disqualified.
Yeah, but whatever your plan is, just make sure you have one, and the kids are very familiar with it and very comfortable with it. I personally, as much as we can, every week we have a designated day. It's sight reading day, and we practice what that process is. I have a student with a timer, and they call out the way that I want that done. And I always ask the judge if it's okay to do that in the room, and I've never been told no. And just do what you plan to do in the room in that practice session. And I would recommend doing it, several times so that it's not new or foreign or whatever to the kids. And then I think the other big thing is, go ahead and pre-assign your percussion parts so that they know exactly what they're supposed to do when they get in that room and they get that music. We know ahead of time what instruments are going to be called for in the room. I know it goes out, from the chairs, to let you know what to expect and what instruments to bring. So, as long as they know ahead of time, and this is what I'm going to be responsible for, and they're not having to argue about it or figure it out, or you're not having to waste time figuring it out or whatever, I think that matters a lot. And I was going to say something else and I just lost it. But if I think of it, I'll let you know.
I also wanted somebody to talk about at the end of the 5 minutes, get to play a scale, and if you could talk about that.
I'll springboard off of that then. So we also practice the scales that we could encounter each day so that they know what that part of the routine is as well. When the prep is over with, we've assessed what the keys are. If there are 2 keys, we play the second key first, or that scale, and then we play the key that it's going to start with. And I usually only just go up 1 octave, just to familiarize them with it. But you're welcome to do that. I think the other thing that you have to take into consideration, and I know I always try to ask the judge ahead of time, so Jamie, I need to ask you this later, but when to tune the timpani so that the timpanist knows when that's going to take place, and that's already a pre-planned, part of the process as well.
I differ a little bit, and Audrey may be on my boat a little bit, but when you're in middle school and they're terrified of what you're about to do, I'm not giving the judge any indication we might not know what we're doing. So when they're like, you can play a scale, I'm like, no, thank you, we're good, we're going to play. We might play a concert F or whatever just to make sure we sound okay in the room, and then we're off. I'm not exposing myself like that yet. So you don't have to play a scale when they say that. You can just jump right in.
Well, I do that at the high school. I don't know what their process at the middle school is at the moment.
You can do that at the middle school or at the high school level. I mentioned that we took our small instruments off. So when we put our small instruments back on, we play one note, make sure that everything got back the way that we liked it, right? Make any adjustments that you need to, and we go straight into it. Because good Lord, you'll have that one kid who plays a B flat in their concert B flat scale that should have been a B natural. And now the judge is worried about that instead of listening to how you play your piece. So like, we'll take that one note and make sure everything's working, and off we go.
I
This is
always had my kids do the scales. We practiced it, but I would change it to whole notes up and down and gave the percussion instructions on what to do during that scale, because I don't know, I always felt better if we could play the scale and then play the piece in the same key.
I did like her question about when to tune the timpani. Jamie, when do you have your kids do that? That was a great question. I don't know that I've ever thought about it. I think my percussionists just do it.
That's kind of the, like, if I have a timpani player, they're usually like amazing at it and they've already tuned it and they're quietly doing it, or it's happening, right before I get on the, with the judges right before they do their script. I've also, when it's like been a tight schedule as a sight reading judge, like, or if I have time in between, sometimes I just go and adjust the timpani for the bands and say, hey, the timpani's already set, you're good to go. So that just takes one less stress off that band director for them.
Sure.
I remembered what I was going to say before. I don't let my students ask questions in the sight reading room. Like, I go ahead and say, does everybody have music?
Mhm.
You have the right part, that sort of stuff. But I have found when they ask questions, they can ask some dumb questions. And I know people say there's no such thing as a dumb question.
There
Yes.
is.
When you're in
I tell
sight
my
reading
kids the same. I tell my kids the same thing, and it's because one time, one of my first, second years, we were about to do it, and a kid raised her hand. I was like, I did like this, like, we're not talking. And he's like, no, it's important. I said, what is it? And they're like, I don't know how to play the auxiliary. And I was like, that's auxiliary, and it's all the extra percussion parts. So thank you for asking that question.
You gotta love them. All right, the MPA list is the most current one is on the NCBA website. Can you all talk about why it's important that you check this version of the list before you go selecting your pieces, and even after you select them, to double check?
I checked 3 or 4 times just to be careful, because the list has changed, and there's some pieces that have gone from 3 to 4 or from 3 to 2. And there are also some pieces that came off the list. There's times that that's happened. Very rarely does that happen, but that's happened. And what I've gotten from a lot of people, like new directors, they don't understand the NCBA grade 2 and the cover of their piece of music may be different grades, and they don't understand. And so I'll call them and I'm like, hey, you registered in grade 4, but you're not, you're really a grade, 2 or 3. And they're like, oh, well, the front cover of the music said it was a 4. So I thought I was in 4. I'm like, no, that's not how that works. You have to go to the NCBA's list and look and see where it is on the list and what grade it falls under.
And they do change. And if you don't pick your music from the list, you can be disqualified, which means you're not going to get ratings at festival. You're also not going to get comments, because your judges aren't allowed to give commentary if you've been disqualified from festival for having repertoire that's not on the list.
Well, and I know, just going through the process of checking the rep against the list and having to make that unfortunate phone call or send that email. Hey, this is not the grade level you think it is. Or just looking at past performance history. I know this is not quite the question you asked, but just keeping track of the music that your program has performed in the past. And I've had to contact people. You got a different march, because you can't play that one. But now they've switched it up to every 3 years for middle school, whereas it was every 4. That's going to make things a lot easier, I think, for folks. It's this year and then 2 years prior.
Yes.
Did that change?
Yes.
Yeah, for middle school, it did it. So they don't have to repeat 4 years. They only have to repeat 3. But I went ahead and used it because I do middle and high as one MPA event. So I just have my kids that my directors submit the same form. So even it'll have a list for 4, but I only look back with 3 for middle. But like I know Tracy probably does this, and Audrey, you may too. But like I make my directors turn in their rep like 2-3 weeks before the event, and then I cross-reference it for them so that I kind of give them like, oh God, you can't play this piece. You played it 2 years ago, or oh, this piece isn't on the list. And so at least it gives them like 3 weeks to figure it out and figure out what they want to do.
Yep.
And just one other thing that popped into my head. We had this happen a few years back. Someone ordered scores. They checked to make sure they were numbered, put them in their packet, brought them. And it wasn't until the stage judges got a hold of them, we realized that they were orchestra scores instead of band scores.
Oh.
And
That's happened to me, and it was not me as the band director, but me as a judge, and it was the flex arrangement, and they were not playing the flex arrangement.
That's scary. The
So
other
is that
thing,
scary because it disqualifies? Let's just make that clear. Are they disqualified for having that?
that was what the judges decided in the case that I had to deal with. Yes.
Mine was no, we didn't disqualify them for that.
So that's going to be based on your panel.
Well, and you
Well,
said
honestly, it goes to your MPA chair, and it how sweet you can talk the judges into what you really think they should do.
also, if you're a director coming into a band program, and it's really helpful if the previous director has left a list for you, so you know what was performed in previous years, and then you should do the same thing when you leave your school to make sure that they have that information. And I would keep it on our band website, so it was always there, and I didn't have to worry about looking it up otherwise.
And if you don't know, you can always, usually your MPA chair has that info from years. Like I've done MPA since 2012, my district. So I have it all the way back to them for directors if they want.
So
Yeah,
if you come across a piece that you really like and you think it would be good for MPA, there is a process to submit and propose that a piece be added. You can also do it to have pieces moved or deleted. But could you all talk about that process of proposing new pieces for the list?
Oh, I can do it. Okay. So I guess, I was the MPA committee chair for the state as president-elect. And so there's a process where there is a form you can fill out online. And honestly, I used it a lot because if there was a piece that was not in the contest side of my library, if it was over in the other side, but I thought was the contest like, I would submit them just to get them on the list. And so there's a committee. Each district has a middle and a high rep for this committee, and they meet twice a year. They meet at conference and they meet at Allstate. And what they do is they go through all the music that was submitted. You have to submit a score with it. There's a process to, like, you have to answer all these questions, like what kind of range, why do you think this piece is it on list in other states, all those questions. And then they'll ask you to submit a PDF of the score. And the committee will sit down usually with their computers and they'll listen to the piece, and then they'll discuss what they think, the pros and cons, and then they'll let you know whether or not they've been added to the list or not added to the list. A lot of times they get added, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're not in the grade level you thought they would be, but and if you don't, and if it didn't get added and you're not happy, submit it again next year.
In the chat box, I put the link to the page that tells you more about how you can have new music possibly added and how you submit that. There are indicators to help you with the process, and it's a pretty easy submission process once you've done it a few times. At first, it may look overwhelming, but should really consider doing that and adding some pieces.
Also, you can change grade levels with that too, that same process. So there's a piece in your library that you're like, I really like this piece, but it seems really hard for it to be a grade 2. You can submit the same thing and ask that it be considered to be moved up to grade 3. I know, like we did that at Tryon Palace a few years ago. It's just, it's not being played on grade 2, but maybe if it's bumped up to grade 3, it would get more, playing time.
So I know the committee takes submissions that are sent in by April 23rd to consider for the next school year. That's when they handle the deletions or grade level changes. You can have all that done through that process. November 1st, you can submit some more pieces to be added, but they don't do anything else. The committee time is limited at conference, and so they just take additions at that time. All right. Can you guys talk a little bit about the benefits for bands to attend, but maybe not play for ratings?
Well, I personally think it should be, it should be about the feedback first and foremost. And so I think going for comments will definitely get you the same feedback that you would get if you were going for the ratings, but not necessarily have that pressure that you might feel if you feel like a score is going to be attached to your performance.
Definitely. We have a lot of young directors in our district right now. And so some of our young directors will choose to come for comments only as opposed to ratings to take some of the stress out of MPA that first time. Or they're trying to rebuild a program and they want to get their kids exposed to the MPA experience without the pressure of having a rating attached to that. And there's no shame in coming for comments only, right? You don't have to have a rating. Sometimes it's hard to consider, having that rating attached to your name when it's mandatory to send out and have it go out to the entire state because it's published in the Music Educators magazine, right? Some teachers don't want that attached to their name as well with a particular ensemble. So I think there's a lot of reasons to go for no comment or for comments only, for not going for a rating, and that all of them are valid, that ratings are not mandatory. You don't have to go for that.
Tracy's right. It's for the feedback first and foremost. And so if I think if that's what's going to get you there to take the stress away from you from that attachment of that superior, excellent, average, then take it away and just come to get the comments and get comfortable doing it. Then maybe in a year or two, you'll feel like trying it out for a score.
And we do have bands all the time that will come and they're not going to perform, but they are there to see how the process goes. And I know Kim Wise, every year she would take her kids and she would give them the adjudication form and have the kids fill it out on a couple bands. So that was a good process for them to learn.
I'm also offering in my district this year, if you're not coming, if you are not coming and because you're new and you want to learn more about the process, if you sign in with me when you get there and sign out so I can tell how long you were there, we're giving CEUs for that. I talked to Susan about that. And so I've had a couple of directors say, hey, I can't come this year, but I'm going to come and spend a day and watch the process and listen to some bands and get some CEUs for it.
Well, and we're actually working on that in our district as well. I think that might be coming pretty soon. That was one of the things I was going to say is, just if you can get away from work, and especially if you can talk your administrator into looking at it as a professional development or a learning experience, then sit there and take notes and then compare the score that you would give with the score that the judges actually give out. And I've known a lot of people, and I've been guilty of this too, where I'll try to sit kind of in close proximity to the judges and eavesdrop and just kind of see how they're reacting to what they hear and, trying to learn and take in, just the experience of sharpening my observation as a listener and, just trying to figure out how it all works. Because I think that's going to benefit you when you go back into the classroom and you're trying to figure out how to assess, your own ensembles.
I personally did that last year because I have never judged. I've been middle school my whole career until next year, and I never judged high school bands until I got asked to do the Eastern District, and they do the same thing I do. It's all grade levels, and so I was gonna know I was gonna have to judge grade 6 bands. And so I told Jim Kirkpatrick, I said, "Hey, if you don't mind, I'm gonna kind of sit in front of you a lot and just listen to what you're saying, and try to learn what he thinks and how to listen to those types of ensembles because they sound way different than West Wind Overture."
Yeah, and I think one of the most valuable things about the MPA experience for my students, particularly, is listening to the other groups and listening to their peers play repertoire that is similar or harder or easier than what we're doing, so that they have an idea of what other students are doing and playing. So we try and stay and have both groups listen to at least 3 other bands, just so that they have a really varied experience as they go on their performance day, so that it's not just about the performance, but it's about the performance and the listening and the assessing and all the different things that we do in our band program to make better musicians.
I agree. Like, it's nice for the bands to have somebody listening to them as well. It's nothing. It's just, that you have worked your rear end off for 6, 7 weeks on this music, and you turn around and there's 2 people in the audience and 3 judges, and that is it. And so it's really nice to have a group of, to hear an applause when you finish it.
And knew we talked about what to do when you aren't able to get the hard copies of the scores. And I'm not sure in the other districts if they do this or not, but Tracy, could you talk about our score library that we have?
Yeah, so we started this quite a few years back, and fortunately, we had a lot of schools make donations. We continue to get donations, year after year, and we have a couple of wonderful directors who curate that. And so basically, the list goes up on the website, and you can check to see not only if there are scores available for a piece that you might be playing, but how many copies. Because sometimes, there may only be 2, and so it's going to be your responsibility to maybe find that third one. But it really has been a valuable, resource for us. And if you don't have that luxury, or, what you need doesn't happen to exist in there, one of the best things to do is to reach out to other directors in your district and find out if people have copies of those. Because typically, if people have taken them to MPA before and there isn't a score library available, then they've had to purchase those copies. And so they have them available in their library. And, I know most folks are pretty wonderful about trying to help each other out. And you could probably, as long as you plan it well enough ahead of time, could probably borrow that. And I know, sometimes expense is just as much a concern as anything. Just trying not to break the bank, trying to get copies of scores to be able to have that MPA experience.
In your experiences going to MPA, how far ahead do you recommend ordering scores?
It's hard to say nowadays because things take a lot
Right,
longer.
it used to be you could probably order them 3 weeks ahead and get them, but I think now you need 3 months.
Not kidding. I ordered scores at the beginning of February, and they're still like, "Oh, we have this on our list. I'm not sure when they're going to send." And I'm like, "It's March, y'all. You're out of time. It's going to be 6 weeks, and I don't know that I'm going to have scores yet." So we might be asking for that Pepper letter this year on stuff that I've had on order since the beginning of February.
I've had a couple of situations where they've sent me the wrong scores, and I've had to, get them picked up, sent back, and try again. So there's been that. And of course, I've gotten MPA scores like the week after we performed.
Yeah,
But I think it's a good resource to reach out and ask other direct. Like I know I got like several sets that I'm taking with me to MPA for other directors that, like this same situation, like, hey, mine's on back order. I don't know if I'm getting it. What do I do? And I said, well, this is what you do, but I have this piece. I'll bring those scores with me.
Yeah, Suzanne wrote in the chat box that she ordered hers in September.
That's
So
probably smart. We probably should have all done that.
yeah, definitely.
Well, enough they had to know what you're playing too.
Well, I've gotten to where now, and this might be a good idea too, is like if I order a piece and it's on the list, I go ahead and just order 3 scores for it when I do it.
Yep, definitely. Are there any questions from our guests or any other things you feel for our panel members that you need to add?
Well, I have a few thoughts after we see if anybody has any questions.
Okay. I think you're safe to go ahead, Tracy.
Well, one of the first things I would say is where it seems like we've run into a little bit of trouble is when we as chairs send information out to the membership and maybe not everybody reads things as thoroughly or as carefully as they need to. And then, it kind of turns around and bites them in the behind because they didn't know something, but it was there. And we're trying to just be as informative and helpful as possible. So I think, just making sure that you're familiarizing yourself with every aspect, not only going through and just looking at the rules that are found on the website, and then also, looking for those emails that are coming out from the chairs. I would also say that if you're not a seasoned director, to buddy up with someone who is and ask questions, ask them to talk you through what the process is like, what you need to know when you walk up to the registration table. I will say for the comments only, I don't remember if we mentioned this or not, but I know at least in our district, you have up until you walk away from that registration table to decide whether you're going to go for comments only or not. You obviously can't get on the stage and play and say, oh, this really should be comments only. Can you change that? Because no, we can't. But just really trying to find some folks that are very familiar with and very comfortable with the process and asking them to mentor you, through the MPA process and everything. And one of the problems that I've run into over the years, but especially more so lately, is, issues with registrations, because a lot of times it seems like we put things in the hands of people that don't really understand what MPA is and how it works and all of that. And I'm very fortunate that we do all of our stuff through a booster organization, but I know that's not necessarily the case for everybody else. So if you can get your check from the person who writes the check and put it in the envelope that you have filled out and take it to the post office yourself and watch them postmark it, then that is the absolute best way to guarantee that it happened the way that it was supposed to happen. And I have been saying that very thing to several people here lately because of issues that they've encountered, not really so much through any fault of their own, although, the earlier you can register, I think the better. And I don't know what your windows are in other districts. We've gotten ours changed where we have a little bit more wiggle room now. But if you have conflicts, if you know that your school's going to be out on a certain day, or you have a half day or whatever, try to go ahead and get a jump on the registration so you get a better chance of getting the date that you need to have. And when you're registering, you don't have to know what your repertoire is when you register. I think sometimes people hold off on registering because they think they have to know exactly what their music is going to be. And so that puts them at a little bit of a disadvantage if you're a postmark driven schedule. And I think probably most, if not all of us are.
Can I address Jonathan's question?
Yes.
So if you get on stage and your placement is not like you want it, change it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't like to be so far up on stage, and so if I come out and that's where they are, but do it as quick as you can, because we are on the crunch to get you on and off that stage. If you're grade 2 and 3, 20 and 25 minutes, you know what I'm saying? 1 and 2, I mean, so just do it as quick as you can, but go ahead and adjust it, move it where you need to move it, make it better, because this is all about you doing the best performance you can. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
I'd say leave it be in the warm-up room though. Use as much
Don't touch
time.
anything or sight reading. Like, I have my sight reading room, and I tell my band directors too to go ahead and prep their kids that it's not going to look like they did on stage. Like, I set it up for the biggest band, and then try to sit towards the middle.
Audrey, do you have anything else you would like to add?
I would just encourage you to know what your own philosophy about MPA is. Why do you go to MPA? And then communicate that with your kids so that you're all on the same page and that you can all have as positive of an experience as you can have on that day. Because if the kids are expecting one thing and the director is expecting something else, or if the director is super stressed out, all of that energy is going to transfer to your kids, and your kids are going to be super stressed out. And then your performance isn't going to go as well as you want it to, or you thought that it should. So have a reason that you are attending this festival and know what it is and communicate it to your kids.
That's great advice. Very good advice.
Mm.
I was going to add one little tidbit. Food is a great motivator for everybody. And with my middle schoolers, it was always about the Golden Corral and being able to eat on our way back, if we had a morning time. And if you do that, they really like a heads up, especially if you have a big group and they can put you in a separate room. You do have to guard the desserts on your way out. But we always had a really good time with that. And it wasn't just fast food, and they could sit down and enjoy each other's company. So let the restaurant know ahead of time. And if you can work it out where the kids prepay when they turn in their permission slip, and you can just write one check or use the band card, it's super easy to do that way. All right, one last chance for questions from any of our guests. Well, I really, really appreciate having Suzanne, Christina, Jonathan, Richard, Paul, and Paula here tonight. Thank you for attending. This has been recorded, and we will have that posted on Facebook and on the NCBA website, so you can refer back to it. Our panelists tonight, thank you so much. I hope this has been a good source of information and will alleviate any anxiety that some of you may have in going to MPA. And we wish you all the best as you go to your different events. And thank you for attending tonight.